Well, good evening, everybody. Harry Schroeder with you from Springfield, Missouri. Just got done doing the basketball game between the Bears and the Bradley Braves. Bradley was really dominant off defensively. They were offensively pretty good, but they were just dominant defensively. And we might talk about that game a little bit tonight. But I want to talk about Indiana State. They're the talk of the Missouri Valley Conference right now after that big win over Drake earlier this week. Then they got a non-conference win today, and I thought people out there in the social media world, they want to know about the Sycamores, and nobody better to talk about that than Luke Martin. We bring him in, the play-by-play voice of the Sycamores, and our good friend there is in Terre Haute. And I said, hey, why don't you come on my podcast tonight? You're only an hour behind me. It's 11 o'clock at night, and this guy is willing to do that. So, Luke, I appreciate you joining on the podcast tonight. You had nothing else to do. I mean, there wasn't any good movies on, or you didn't want to go to bed?
No, I mean, Terre Haute is hopping right now about Indiana State basketball. No one can go to sleep. We're already excited to go to Carbondale Wednesday. I mean, I about called Mike Reese tonight and be like, can I bunk with you the next couple of days and just start camping out there at Banterra Center? So, no, I really – it's great to catch up with you, Harry, and always enjoy our conversations throughout the year. And as you know, we have so many talented people in our league that do a great job, whether their team is successful or not. And I'm just very thankful right now. There's a long season to go. I mean, there's still 19 more Valley games to be played here. But just it makes it that much more exciting when the fans are into it. We had a great environment Wednesday at Holman Center. It was the best environment, honestly, I've been a part of outside of the Larry Bird reunion game when that 40-year team came back for Loyola a couple years back. But outside of that environment on Wednesday against Drake was second to none. And to bounce it back today, I mean, they absolutely just thumped Miami in a game that I think many thought you'd be maybe a little sluggish, after you get everyone kisses you on your butt for a couple days. How would you respond? Well, they were up 30 at halftime, and they trailed the first 12 seconds and never looked back today. So there's a lot of optimism. So I'm happy to stay up late and talk about all those things.
Sycamores are 8-1, and they were whatever they were going into the game against Drake, 5-1 or 6-1, I guess. And so I was very anxious to see how Sycamores would play against the Drake team that everybody picked to win the conference. And I got to watch part of it. It started early. Of course, you guys are in the Eastern time zone, and I was at the St. Louis Tennessee State game that started later. So I got to watch a lot of that game, but I think people were surprised that even though it was at home, that the Sycamores took the measure of the preseason favorites. Talk about that game a little bit. What did Indiana State do so well to neutralize Drake, and in particular, Tucker DeVries?
Well, give credit to Cam Henry. I asked Coach Schertz today. He talks about guys that affect winning. And I know he's said that in many interviews with you. He wants to build a roster where guys touch winning in many different ways. And for Cam Henry, he had the assist to Robbie Avila, who had the 3 to get him within 2 late. And then Cam Henry scored the final 6 points in that game, but also had the defensive stop to force a really difficult shot for Tucker DeVries to go to his opposite hand and force the miss and be able to get a rebound. The job he did on Tucker DeVries that first half, I believe, is still the lowest point total that DeVries has had in a half. He only had 5 points in that first half. He only had 1 clean look at a 3. It was the 1 3 he made, and it was on a switch. Cam got caught up in a switch, and Courvoisier got on Tucker DeVries and didn't quite get up far enough, and Tucker made him pay. But that's where I feel like Cam, the whole summer, he told me, Harry, Luke, I want to be – everyone knows I can score. I want people to know that I can defend. And Indiana State knew that for them to make a jump this year, they had to get better on the defensive side of the ball. And one of the stories I really like telling and haven't had a ton of time to tell on television yet, but I'll share it with you here, is back in the summer, Coach Schertz got a phone call from Drew Valentine. And Drew Valentine said, hey, you guys we couldn't guard you. Like, I want to learn your offense and learn your scheme. We're no longer in the Valley. Can would you be okay swapping notes? And Coach Search says, yes, as long as you teach me your defense. so this summer, they spent multiple days with each other in Chicago.
Wow.
Coach Search went up to Chicago and spent a lot of time with Coach Valentine. They become really, really close friends over the last year just in the Valley. And I'm not saying I give all the credit to Coach Valentine and sharing the defensive schemes, but one of the areas that Indiana State has changed a lot was they switch much more. A lot of that is due to personnel and having guys being able to switch four, and sometimes, depending on the lineup on the floor, switch at all 5 positions to be positionless. But specifically against Drake, Indiana State in the first half, they weren't dribbling very much. They were passing the ball very crisply with crisp passes. And then in the second half, they got a little bit too dribble happy. That's when Drake really started to come back. The pace of play really started to go in Drake's favor. What Indiana State has done, and you've seen it at times this year, when they can make it a battle of attrition, Harry, when you got to make guys 6 through 9 on your roster matter, that's where Indiana State, I feel like, can really make their hay, for a lack of a better phrase, because this is a very deep roster. I know when people hear, you and I have done so many interviews through the years, we hear coaches all the time talk about depth, right? We hear coaches say, I can play 10 to 11 guys. And most of the time, they only play 6, maybe 7. And you're like, where was this 11 guys you said you could play? Well, I'm telling you right now, Coach Schertz has 11 guys who can play, and he will play 11. It may not be every night, but you will see a different mix. Xavier Bledson, he was one of the MVPs of that Gulf Coast Showcase. He really hasn't been much of an impact at all the last couple games. And that's where it just shows the depth of this team. So just to get back to your original question of what did Indiana State do well against Drake, they just pushed the pace. They played at their pace. Then Drake, the veteran group, they made great adjustments defensively. They went a little bit smaller in that second half. They didn't play with Brody as much, which allowed them to switch 5 ways. I think they just aggravated Indiana State much. But then down the stretch, when Indiana State needed to make plays, I mean, when Roman Penn put Drake ahead by 5 points, just under 3 minutes to go, I think if you took a poll in that building before Avila hits that 3, I don't think many people thought Indiana State was going to win that game. But once Avila hit the 3, then the momentum started to build, and then Indiana State made those plays late. And that's what made, I think, that win so much more impactful, was just how Indiana State got the job done that night.
Don't you think he needs to get cooler goggles? I mean, he's got those glasses, and I think he's got to go Horace Grant glass, big goggles. It'll be a much better image.
I will tell you this. I got to give credit to Matt Wren, who's my analyst on television and will fill in on radio with me too. He's been doing broadcast here for years, over a decade. He said, Luke, Robbie may be the first guy that's got so many different creds. He's got street cred because he's got the arm sleeve tattoo. He's got the nerd cred with the goggles. He reaches all different fan bases, all different dynamics within your fan base. And Robbie's a great kid too. I mean, I whenever you get a chance to talk to him, he's one of the most humble guys you will meet. And what Coach Search says, and it's perfect. I mean, you watch that game against Drake, and I know Coach Z said this on the television broadcast. Coach Z said someone needs to remind him that this is his first Valley game. The moment is never too big for him, and you don't find that a lot in freshmen. And he's made 3 straight starts. All 3 he's scored in double figures. Already has a double-double. Granted, that was against Trinity Christian, but he did almost have a double-double today against Miami. And I give a lot of credit to Calix Stevens. Calix Stevens actually went to the staff, I believe, from what I was told, and said, look, I know I've been starting, but if we're going to win in the Valley, we have to develop Robbie. We have to develop K. McKnight. We got to get guys who can bang down in the post. And for Calix to be willing to give up basically a starting spot for those guys and now come off the bench, it really shows the unselfishness, and I feel like the young culture that Coach Schertz has already built within his team.
I was telling you before we started, when I talked to Josh Schertz at the MVC Media Day, Crevassier, McCauley, 6 points a game at DePaul. Okay, that's good. It's a big league, and so he should be a really good Valley player. And obviously, he had played for Coach at Lincoln Memorial, so he knew him well. So I thought, okay, this guy's going to be a good contributor. But Coach told me off the record. I mean, he didn't say I couldn't say it to anybody. It wasn't while we were interviewing each other. He said, "Oh, Courvoisier is going to lead us in scoring. He's going to be our number one offensive weapon." And when he said that, I thought, oh, wait, that shifts everybody around. And that means, oh, wait, Indiana State's going to be a lot better. Like I knew that right off the bat, just by that one sentence. And so for Valley people that haven't seen Courvoisier play yet, tell us about his game.
Well, if you watch him and you watch his shot, you'll see he's got a hitch in his shot, and you'll go, this guy is going to make that many shots. You just kind of look at him play and you think this guy's really that good. And, I'm going to somewhat misquote Coach Schertz or not get exactly right, but you can have a good player in a bad system and it just not work out for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have an average player in a really good system and appear to be a really much better player. I really feel like Voss, as he's known within the locker room, Courvoisier, local kid, grew up in Indianapolis, came from a really tough background, obviously went to Lincoln Memorial to start off his career with Coach Schertz. But he's a baller. I mean, that's really the best way to describe Voss. He will not lack confidence. And I'll say this too. He is going to be a guy that opposing teams will not like. He's going to talk. He's got swagger. When he makes a shot, when he makes a shot, he's going to let you know he made a shot, and he's going to let everybody in the arena know he made the shot, but he backs it up. And, and Coach Schertz talks about it all the time. He wants guys to play with emotion, not necessarily to play emotionally, not be overboard. He wants guys to be that Draymond Green type where you may be pushing the edge. You just can't go over that edge. And Voss is one of those guys. But, I mean, he's going to have days where maybe against Kansas City where he really struggles. I think he had 18 points on 20 shots, wasn't very efficient. But then you're going to have days like today where he had 24 points in the first half when Miami had 28 as a team. And he's making any sort of shot. And it's not just his threes. He can drive. He's physical. I think still he's the leading rebounder for Indiana State after today. So he'll do little things too. I mean, it's not just like he's a pretty boy and just going to put up shots and go back and not get physical. Voss maybe not be the best defensive player for Indiana State, but he is not afraid to battle you, and he's not afraid to fight you. And I don't think he's just got so much experience on his side too. And I think that's why, Harry, what's going to be fun as this team continues to get better and come together. Coach Graves, our associate head coach, actually told it to me. This is one of the oldest teams in college right now, and is Indiana State, but they don't have a ton of shared experience. They're not like Drake. Drake has a lot of shared experience. Roman Ping, Garrett Sturtz, DJ Wilkins. Not only are they old, but they've been old together. They have a lot of experience with one another. Yes,
if you put them all together, I think that and Brody combined have played like 450 games. Literally, I did the math. It's like in that neighborhood.
Yes. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, the fact that Garrett Sturtz and DJ Wilkins have been there for every win under Darren DeVries at Drake, is just a astounding accomplishment, number one, for those guys. But that's not Indiana State. They do have guys who have been in college basketball for a while, but they haven't been around it together. And that's why I really tip my cap to what Coach Schertz has done to be able to cut through the egos and to be able to get those egos all together. Because let me tell you, there's a lot of egos now. Love these guys. There are a lot of egos on this team. And for him to be able to get them to mold, to buy into their roles has really been outstanding. And that's why right now this team has been able to perform at the level they've been able to perform at.
They blow out Miami of Ohio today. They're 8-1, best start in like 15 years or 16 years, something like that. So you have the Drake game, and that's going to be the big test, right? I mean, the first conference game, and obviously passed that test. But you talked about Avila getting into the starting lineup. I think maybe that was his second start. Out of nowhere, Jason Kent gets the start. I don't know what Coach Schertz was thinking. Then he started again today. He's a guy, he's really folksy and winsome, and he has a lot of things he says, Coach Schertz, but he is a stinking student of the game, isn't he? Like, he knows all the numbers and all the tendencies. And I mean, the guy he's like that, not absent-minded professor, but that professor that talks differently than his intellect actually lets you understand. And I'm so impressed by him. But like I look down at that game and I'm like, well, wait, why did Kent start? And and you mentioned the Calix Stevens component to getting Avila into the starting lineup. But can you take us into the Jason Kent starting the last couple of games thinking?
Yeah, a lot of it, especially for the Drake game, was more due to illness and guys being out. Voss was sick that night. He wasn't going to be able to start. He did play in the game, but that was more just because he missed 2 days of prep time. So that's more why Jason went in for that situation for Indiana State on Wednesday night against Drake. They just really like, Jason Kent's ability Jason's shown a lot of flashes this year. It's just trying to sustain him. He scored the first 8 points against Drake and then didn't score again until like the final 3 minutes in the game. Defensively, he struggled a little bit today, fouled a little bit too much in today's game against Miami. I think for Jason, he's just got to have confidence. And I don't want to speak necessarily for the coaches if that's what they're trying to do, is just to give him more confidence. But he's definitely got the ability and skill set to be a huge contributor. Everyone knows what he can bring defensively. I think he still wants to showcase what he can do offensively more in that situation. But to you, Harry, and you know this because you've talked to Coach Schertz a lot, this is really one of the first teams I've ever been around that's really positionless, and where whoever starts the game really doesn't have a ton of emphasis. It's you used to kind of the old way. I don't want to say old way of thinking. That's not the right way to be. But you used to, if you're not starting, your role's maybe not as important, or you're not going to play starter minutes. Julian Larry at times, Xavier Bledson at times. Both those guys will come off the bench, but they'll mostly, if they're playing well, they will probably play starter minutes, more times than some of those guys who do start. It's just more of how they feel they can get off to a good start in the game and see how it goes. Last year, again, we talked about COVID and all that stuff impacting. I think Indiana State had 18 different starting lineup combinations a year ago. Through the first 6 games this year, they have the same starting lineup. That was more than any lineup combination they had all of last year. So after all, and again, that was to your point, I've been around a lot of coaches, even though I'm still young in this thing. I've been around a lot of different coaches. But I'll tell you what, Harry, I've not been around a coach that is as in tune and that knows as much about an opponent, that knows as much about a game plan, that knows as much about what they got to focus on that day more than Coach Schertz. Probably the only person, which I know this is a Valley Hoops podcast, the only person I would put in his category would be our baseball coach here, Mitch Hannes, who I think so highly of in terms of competitor and has built a great program here. I put those two in that category of guys when it comes to the game are so locked in. And Coach Schertz and I were actually talking about, I think sometimes people are like, why does he maybe show more emotions with officials or calls or whatever the case may be? He goes, Luke, I can't get caught up in that, because if I'm arguing about a call for 3 straight possessions, those 3 possessions may impact the game. I got to lock in. I can get upset maybe initially, but then I got to control. I tell my guys to move on to the next play. I got to be locked into the next play. Sure. I can't be focused on a lot of those extracurriculars that may go on. And if you watch him throughout a game, that's exactly what you're going to see. You're going to see a guy who's not necessarily totally calm demeanored, but you're going to see a coach who, that mind is racing. You get a camera on him during a broadcast, and you can see him, whether turning to an assistant, whether turning to a player, whether looking at his bench, looking at the floor. He is constantly, and not to say other coaches, a lot of coaches do it. Every coach does it really in a way. I was saying for him, you can just constantly see the wheels. There is never a possession, even when you're up 30 like today. There weren't a possession late in that game today. He got so torqued off when he put the reserves in. He put the starting 5 right back in 3 minutes later. He's, I don't like what I'm seeing. Let's get the starting 5 back in. And they all come back in. So that's what I appreciate about him, is how locked in he is, and is how you describe. He is a basketball savant. There's no question about that.
No, negative thing. Cooper Neese gets injured in the game, I guess at Drake. I mean, against Drake. Didn't play today. Tell us about Cooper's injury and what can you tell us about that?
Well, it is bad news, but it's really honestly good news. They were very concerned that it was going to be some sort of ACL type season-ending injury when it initially happened. The good news is everything is intact. It's just a very deep bone bruise that Cooper Neese has. Out of all the variables that it could have been, this was the best variable. Now, when people hear deep bone bruise, they sometimes think, oh, that's going to be a pretty quick rebound. It still very well could be a month for Coop till he comes back. It could be 2 weeks. Coop will not be reevaluated. Coach Schroeder said this actually on our radio broadcast today. Coop will not be reevaluated until the end of next week. So if you're wondering if Coop could come back next week for Southern Illinois or even be ready for Southern Indiana, that's not in the equation. I still think, conservatively speaking, I would say probably the start of January is when you would maybe even see Coop start coming back into practice, which is, hey, that's great. I'm glad it's not season ending. It is a good thing that Cooper is going to be back. And you look at his numbers. I mean, this is the most efficient year he's had, and he's been playing really well. Now, his numbers may not be as gaudy as what he put up a year ago, but the efficiency numbers are way better. I mean, he's playing at a much better level than he was, and honestly, at any time in his career here. And that's what made that stink for him, because he was,
wow.
He truly, you could just see this year, Harry, and as the season was going along, I mean, he wasn't very good the first game of the year, but then comes back and scores 16 points in the first half against Ball State and was on fire. Like, he knows his role too. And he knows what he's got to do. He understands he doesn't have to be the guy, and he can just, if he's going to shoot 6 shots, he's going to make sure that's the 6 most efficient shots he can get. And Darren DeVries was great. Drake was great as well. It was obviously a hard collision. No intent at all. And Darren DeVries actually, after the game, went into the training room, talked to Coop, made sure he was okay. The next day, Darren was the first one to text Coach Schurz, hey, what'd you hear? How's he doing? So Drake was no surprise at all. Really respect Coach DeVries. But as everyone knows, those things just happen in sports. And there's, freak accidents, freak injuries happen. Just thankfully for everybody involved, that it didn't go in a really bad way, and that Coop would be out for the rest of the year. But it's still a big loss. I mean, losing him for the next 4 games, or potentially the next 4 games, is still big.
Tell me about Cade McKnight. A lot of people are thinking big things for him, but I noticed he hasn't played the last couple of games. I don't know anything other than he hasn't been in the game.
I feel so bad for Cade McKnight. I mean, Cade has just had bad luck. He's sick right now. He's been out all week, hasn't even been able to be around the team. I believe he tested positive, I believe, for the flu. And so just to take you through, and I mean, this summer he was dominant. I was in that practice gym a lot. I know maybe in the short minutes that he's had on the floor, our fans may be going, you're a little crazy thinking that. But I'm telling you, in the gym this summer, everyone was going around, hey, what's your starting 5? Who do you think is going to be in the starting 5? And really the first name many people would say was going to be Cade. Cade was the guy that everybody, his leadership, what he's going to bring is going to be huge. And then in that Youngstown secret scrimmage, he had an injury to his lower foot, turned out to be a bone fragment in his foot. That was the same injury that Cam Crawford, who needed surgery, and Jason Kent had towards the end of the summer and needed surgery on as well. And Cade, obviously, if he had surgery, most likely would end his season or would take a good chunk out of his last season. So I believe they gave him a cortisone shot, tried to see how he would feel. And he came back and he said, I feel good enough that I can play. I know the surgery is going to be something I'm going to need at some point, but I'm going to push through it and play. And then he got sick. and so he's maybe practiced, maybe 3 times over the last 2 weeks and just hasn't had much time on the floor. And also, Robbie Avila is playing great. Calix is playing really good. So you got guys in front of them that are playing really well. So it's like you want to get Cade a little bit of a run, But if you put him out there, that means one of those guys or both those guys are not out there either. So that's the hard part for him is right now you want to see him get back. I still feel like, Harry, he is going to make an impact. I mean, I would be stunned if we go through this year and K McKnight is not impact. I still think he's going to be a huge part of this team and a big part of this roster. There has just not been a guy that's had more bad luck. I mean, just purely bad luck over the last month than K McKnight. But hopefully he'll get healthy, get back, and then, he'll probably be just like Coop, try to get back to 100%. And then, but again, when guys in front of you are playing really well, that's going to make it even harder for you to get time out on that court.
So before I let you go, because it's you got to go to bed. Before I let you go, so 8-1, you don't expect to go 24-3 or something like that. I mean, that would we'd all be unrealistic. But this has got to be the most energized, at least early season of optimism and so forth that we've seen at Indiana State in, gosh, a long time.
Long time. I mean, it's the most excitement ever that I've been a part of. And I've been at Indiana State for 6 years. To kind of put in perspective, Indiana State does go to Southern Illinois next. If Indiana State would find a way to win at Southern Illinois, which in the history for Indiana State, if there's a venue that they have just never really played well in, it's SIU Arena and the Banterra Center. But if Indiana State would win that game and they would be 9-1, the last time they were 9-1 or better through 10 games would have been 78-79, which, of course, that year is when Indiana State went all the way to the national title game. I'm not saying that is going to happen this year. But what I am saying is that just is the comparison of why people here are so excited and why that enthusiasm is building. Today, yes, was technically the first true road test. There was nobody in that facility today. No offense to Miami. There was just nobody there. And that environment was dead. That is not going to be Banterra on Wednesday. And Southern Illinois is going to punch Indiana State in the face. I mean, to show what type of year it's been, Harry, I just found this hard. I don't know if you saw it. I actually tweeted out tonight. Indiana State's largest deficit this year has been 8 points. They are the only Valley team that's yet to trail by 10 or more points. I mean, and they've only and that was the Kansas City game. They trailed by 8, and they only trailed for, I think it was about 19 minutes in that game. They've really not had a ton of adversity. I mean, they've led at halftime of every game this year. So they've not even had to go into the locker room at the end of 20 minutes and be down on the scoreboard. I mean, this is an Indiana State team that has, for the most part, controlled games and controlled the pace and controlled where they would go outside the Kansas City game that they lost. That is why I feel like Wednesday – is Indiana State one of the best teams in this league? I think there's no question. I think they have proven that. Regardless of what happens Wednesday, I truly believe that if you talk about the upper tier in the Valley, Indiana State's clearly there. If Indiana State finds a way to win on Wednesday, I don't just think they're in the upper tier. They may be the top of that tier. If they can go on the road and win at Southern Illinois, and through 2 games, you've played Drake and you've played Southern Illinois, I don't know if many people would think a team would be 2-0 through that stretch. And I don't know how many other Valley teams this year could say that they would have those 2 wins by the end of this 20-game schedule. So Wednesday is a big one. I mean, I really think Wednesday in that environment on the road, have a lot of respect for Southern Illinois. I know they played well today against SLU. Coach Mullen's team's always going to be a tough game, especially from a defensive standpoint. Yeah. It's going to be a clash of styles, but I really am eager. I want to see Indiana State try to fight an uphill battle on the road in a tough environment. And they fought that uphill battle at home with Drake. But now when everybody in that building doesn't want you to win, how are you going to respond to that? And I know it's going to be a great environment on Wednesday. And if Indiana State leaves Carbondale with a win, you think that excitement level's high now, Harry? Luke Martin may never go to sleep after that trip when we come back from Carbondale. I think it's going to be an even later night for me that night. But it's great to see this excitement. And as you said, this is a fan base that gives a whole lot about basketball. They care about basketball here. They love their basketball here. They always have. And it's really good for everybody. It's great for these players, but it's great for these fans to really have something to be behind right now and really enjoy this ride.
That's Luke Martin. He's the greatest. He's the play-by-play guy there at Indiana State. They're 8-1, off to a great start, and really appreciate you staying up late to talk to us about the Sycamores. Super excited. I'm always excited for any Valley team to do well, right? I'm a Valley guy more than like I'm not a guy associated with one team, but I love to see programs turn. You know, like I was tonight at Bradley and I mean at Missouri State and Bradley. And Tuesday night, I'll be at SIUE to see the Braves play the Cougars there. And SIUE is off to the best start they've ever had in Division I basketball. And so I'm just excited about the Cougars of Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, you know, because there's something positive happening. And I'm happy about the positive things going on in Terre Haute there. So appreciate the time tonight. Appreciate you talking and educating us about the trees, you know, and as we pump this out in various forms, a lot of Valley people will be glad to learn more about your guys as well. Luke, thanks for the time.
I appreciate it, Harry. Always, whenever you need me, you know, I never sleep. So just give me a call.
I'll do it. That's Luke Martin. I'm Harry Schroeder. You've been watching Voices of the Valley, part of the Valley Hoops Insider podcast and website. Listen, we'll be doing a ton of stuff all this week. Later on Monday, I'm on Springfield Radio. They want to talk to me about the game tonight, and we'll be pumping out stories from the Bradley SIUE game as well. We just try to keep you folks informed. Luke, thanks so much. Folks, remember, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll see you again real soon.